Good evening, and welcome to the February 22nd meeting of the Planning Policy Commission. Tonight we're going to discuss the last two areas in our Central Area District Vision Plan. So before we do that, when we ended up last week, I made the comment that for the first like 10 minutes, 15 minutes of this meeting, we were going to go over and make sure that there was nothing else that you had that came out on the two areas that we discussed last week. And so, Keith, do you want to start with West Newport and kind of give us a little rundown of what you've done?
Yes.
Okay.
If I'm given a choice. Okay, so I'm going to have to actually remember what I
Okay, you
did.
don't have the one that has all the little squiggly things in it.
So page 17. I think she meant to start with page 17 and work backwards. Right?
Nope.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So the Word version, so there was a red line version.
Yeah, the Word version was redlined.
Good thing I brought my thumb drive. Give me 1 second, or a little bit longer than 1 second. So talk amongst yourselves.
Okay, so again, welcome to, this is a round table, and I'm going to welcome some of the old task force members and some community members that are especially interested in helping us. That was
Sweet.
fast.
Look at that. All right.
Go right on.
Okay, so we're going to look at what we changed. So
Can you increase the font size on that for me? Please. Yes.
Better?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, apparently I can. Okay, so what I did and what I didn't do. What I did do is you can see a couple small edits in the future description. I did not spend time really putting in more aspiration of the asks from the commission last week. And the reason for that is I think we had a structural conversation that we're going to have a little bit later about whether it looks like this or whether there was another suggestion for how to kind of pull it apart and whether the commission wants option 1 or 2. Once you guys decide that, then I'll go back in and add some more language, and we can talk about that next week when we have our weekly PPC meeting. So two things. The first edit was to talk about how the pedestrian and bicycle connections are not only helping out this neighborhood, but are also making connections to the region. And then the second was to just add light rail to clarify what we were talking about in this last sentence, as opposed to the Sound Transit current bus station on SR 900 now.
Does anybody have anything that stands out that you would like to add, besides the aspirational language that?
Your stuff, I'll incorporate your stuff. If that's what you were going to do, you sent in some edits.
Yeah, I sent some edits and a few comments. Should I just wait till you've cycled that?
I'll do that tomorrow. So the next version that we do the 28th, we'll have those. And we will provide the red line so you guys can actually see the edits. We will send it out a different way.
Thank you.
Yes. All right. Moving down to
Mary?
Yeah, Something that came up with the previous projects was where we're talking about views and view corridors in this section, and I don't really see this addressed, and I don't know where it will be addressed. But the original task force was talking about views from I-90, and then when Gateway came along, they said, well, no, we're really talking about views and Gateway from Newport Way. But I don't see in this where it designates when we're talking about gateways and, you know, from what, is it from I-90 or is it from Newport Way?
Are we looking at putting it in there or in the,
So we have the sentence, "Views to our forested mountains are retained," in the second sentence of the future paragraph.
so doesn't that cover it?
Well, when we talked about that during the Project and Development Commission meetings, they were saying it was only from Newport Way and not from I-90. Because if you drive along I-90 now, because of the way Gateway is built, you basically have blocked the views of the mountains and the trees.
So I think the fact that we're trying to make the central area more dense is going to mean that we are going to have taller buildings. And whether we want to protect the view from people who are on I-90 who are passing through versus people who are in town, I think that's a conversation to have. But personally, I would prefer to protect the view for somebody who's in town.
I think one of the other side impacts of that is, I know one of the things I've heard about is noise mitigation issues, and I think that that project was designed in such a way so that those buildings next to I-90 help mitigate the noise for those deeper in, so.
I have a view corridor question. I threw this in a comment because in one of the other, elsewhere there's, and like city actions, it says views like will be maintained. We talked at the last meeting about how this document will go into, it won't be code, but it'll operate as pseudocode. Can you talk a little bit about how that would work if there's a project being built? Newport may not be the best example, but particularly Pickering and Gilman. Let's say I have a 2-story building and I have a great view of Squawk Mountain or whatever. And then across the street, someone comes in and builds a 6-story building because that's what we want in Pickering. My view's been blocked. Can I point to this document and say my view's not being maintained?
So you could say that. So, you know, part of it is, I think that what's going to happen, and I don't know if this was Lindsay's point or not, you know, what's going to happen is as buildings kind of start to take up the empty spaces or the lesser dense spaces, your views are going to be filtered to some extent. I mean, I think there's still, you know, we've not identified like a view corridor down Gilman or a view corridor down Newport or a view corridor down any particular street is the view corridor that is important. I mean, we I don't want to say argued about this, but we debated this extensively. I'm looking at Mel with Costco's development agreement and their site plan. Because if you look down Lake Drive, there is a view to the south that's pretty nice. But what we found is we have a lot of general language about views and the importance of views. And, you know, the reality is, and I think Mary brought this up before related to the Marriott, is that changed the view of, is that Maple? That's Maple. You know, and it changed it. There's no doubt about it changed it. Now, can you still see the mountains? You can. You might have to move to see them. So this one's not an absolute black and white. Either you have views or you don't. I think it's more of views are wanting to be maintained, you know, but they're going to be less absolute. In other words, maybe I can't stand in the middle of the city and see squawk, tiger, and cougar all at the same time. I might have to walk a block or
But
two.
Keith,
right?
I think what I'm struggling with, and keep in mind that in that, like the example I gave, I would be 100% in favor of the 6-story building should be built, tough cookies about the views, that's the direction the neighborhood's going. But what I'm struggling with is I can't see an example in which this aspirational sentence will ever actually make anything happen. Because if we don't have any specific view corridors and we don't have any specific view language, it seems kind of meaningless because you can just build anything you want. Because no one's going to go and build a 30-story building. So I don't see how this actually drives any change in how the community will develop over the next 20 years.
And going back to Mel, I thought, because thank you, when we had that, I thought we amended the standards, the central standards that views were defined from public areas, from public parks, from different public right-of-ways, so that there was a narrower, maybe that's the wrong word, but there was a more defined definition of what our views, what we're trying to protect, that they're views from public places. Do you recall that was how we ended up changing amending the standards? What would that have been, before the moratorium?
Yeah, I'm not sure if we ended up with that or not, but I think so, because just as Lindsay had said, I had the same argument that I think our views from our citizens' locations are far more important than the I-90 pastor people. And so I'm not sure what language we might have ended up with that, but I don't think we ended up trying to protect I-90 views from the I-90 corridor.
I thought it came from the Costco discussion that you'd raised some really good points, that what views are we protecting and what ones, not so much.
Yeah, and that also came about in terms of the building standards and whether you had to push a building all the way up to the sidewalk, which created a pointed building that blocked the view as Lake Drive curve, so.
Right.
So maybe I can suggest a couple things. One is, I think as a homework item, Trish has now to check and see what we actually put in either the plan or the SIDS to address that and give us a little bit more clarity. The second piece is, so there's a difference for me between this section, which may not seem very aspirational, but is trying to be maybe towards aspirational, and the next section where we actually get into the obligations. But I don't want to dismiss your point, AJ, because I think it's a valid point. And the question for y'all, I guess, is this. We can either leave this in here, and I agree with you, it's going to mean different things to different people, which isn't necessarily a great piece of language. Or we can take it out, or we can suggest editing this so that it's a little bit more clear.
So my suggestion that I put in my comment I sent to you is I think the sentence where it is fine. It's the one that's I think is more problematic is if you go up a page back to the Gilman section, it's right there at the bottom.
It's actually down for me. Oh, it's actually not in this. It's okay.
Regardless,
it's over here.
you actually have.
Look, I got it.
Yeah, increased, views of squawk, tiger, cougar remains. We have it in our measures of success. I think it's in all of them. Yeah, there you go.
I'm getting there. All right, Gilman.
Gilman, yeah. So
Sweet.
at the bottom right, you've got it as the second to last bullet. On the bottom left, second to last bullet. And so we've got it there in our measures of success. So what I recommend is I think the language we have in this document is fine, and I don't think it needs to change, but I think I recommend that PCC takes as an action in our upcoming year of work to have a meeting, I think, devoted to view corridors. And we sit down and do something like when we say we want to have more open space or something like that, or we want to have trails, then ultimately you try to create some sort of document that says, okay, what do we actually mean by that? I think for this one, when we want to have views, we actually need to figure out what we mean by views and identify which views are important, which ones do we want to protect, how do we want to protect them, what all that means. I don't think we neither can nor want to do that now, and I think what's in this document is perfectly fine, but I think my request is, coming out of the moratorium, I think that's something we should try to delve into, and I think could take up a whole meeting at some point in the next couple months.
So if we go back to the statement that you just read in the West Newport, views to the forested mountains are retained and added to by trees and stuff around here. I don't know how to say that. Can we add that into that sentence so that, you're not going to keep all the views. There's just no way you're going to keep and make it exactly the way it is. So I'm happy with a view where I have a nice park with lots of trees and lots of incorporated into the view as far as I'm concerned. So can you add that into that one sentence?
What's the addition?
He was basically saying views to our forested mountains are retained and mirrored by nature closer by, something like that that says.
Added into by implemented, I can't think of a word to add into that right now.
But I think that's fine. I don't disagree with that. But I think the intent of the views to retain, I think the idea is that we have very specific views that are important that we want to protect, rather than just generally we want everyone to be able to see the mountains from everywhere. Do you guys agree? Because I think those mean two very different things. Is it we want people generally to be able to see the mountains, or is it we really want to maintain that view of Rainier along the Rainier Trail? Because I think those mean two very different things from a policy standpoint. What do you guys think it means?
I think from public spaces, it would always be nice to be able to see and know that you are in Issaquah and you're in this valley with these mountains around. So in any public space, you should be able to see all these, what we're talking about, forested mountains. If you're in a dense urban setting where it's just, a street grid and there's no real public square there maybe, there should be one nearby, right? I don't think it's important necessarily that we absolutely have to have a view to a mountain if you're just walking down any given sidewalk. That would be my opinion.
Okay, so.
So John, did we make you make your own name tag tonight? Trish, could I give you some more homework? We'll get you squared away yet, I promise.
You should have drawn a happy face or something. So do you want to add, I thought that we could get through this in about 10, 15 minutes, in a minute.
Yeah.
And we're looking at specifics that I don't know how to put in there, so
I will work on something.
Well, I think my thing is I didn't want to change this. I'm fine moving forward, but I think that particular line requires us to circle back.
So can I ask, point of order, so you had a suggestion from one of the commissioners to set aside a meeting this year to talk about views. Does the commission feel like that's something they want to do? Or you want to think about that and maybe bring that back
think
up
that we
another
need
time?
to look at our schedule and see how many other things have to be discussed. And if there's a way to put it in there, sure.
Yeah, I think similar to what we're doing with the green necklace, where it's a term that we use, but we're putting an effort into making sure that it's well-defined. I think like maybe the term anywhere critical views or something like that, or priority views, or I don't know what that is. If there's something that's specifically talking about being able to see Mount Rainier, right? And that's one thing. And then another thing is kind of we want to make sure we know we're in this beautiful place.
And the outcome of that meeting might be we don't have any specific views we want to protect. I think that's fine. I just think we need to, outside of this process, I think we need to sit down and talk through what that means.
Okay, if there's a room on the schedule, absolutely. Connie, you had a comment?
I think it needs to be a city implementing action. That you create a product that says what you want what the views are, because we don't have such a document right now. So in your implementing actions, it should be a city project that's not just a meeting to PPC, but a process where we actually have a community discussion about what that means.
I think the only
Because-
problem with putting it in one of these city implementing actions is that these are all neighborhoods based.
And it needs to be in each of the neighborhoods, right? Because you're going to be looking at it neighborhood by neighborhood. Because if you want to protect your views in each neighborhood, you're going to have a product that allows you to do that.
I'm not sure that we need to have a whole plan around this. I think we need to talk about it some more, then maybe we'll have a
Okay,
plan come out.
so then I'll say, later on in the document, you say that buildings cannot be closer than, certain buildings of certain height can't be closer than 125 feet apart. And the comprehensive plan has language on this too. The SID, so there is some language on this already that defines it. But I still think it needs to be a citywide discussion, not just a casual discussion at PPC, because the community is really invested in the views of their mountains, and that makes it too small.
Okay,
I don't disagree.
okay.
Mel,
So-
did you have something you wanted to say?
I was going to say that I think it would be very helpful for the Development Commission for you to have that discussion about views, and even if it's your views of views, and sort of what, sorry, very sorry. That's a really bad dad joke. So anyways, to get some feeling, because, a project does come in and somebody could say, well, hey, this building is blocking my view. Your code says you can't block my view of the mountain, so you shouldn't build that there.
Yeah, because
And
something that we would need months from now when we do this
Yeah.
is like I think the staff would need to walk us through, like, okay, if there is a view corridor, like, what does that mean? How do you do that? How do you define it? What does that prevent from happening?
Yeah.
Okay, so we are going to have a meeting. This is going to be a hard discussion because everybody has different views of what a view is and what could be maintained, so.
You have views on views on views.
Yeah, so, okay. But can we
Sorry.
get through this? I mean, we have three
What's the
more
next
to go
section?
through. So,
All right.
I'm trying to get you into, this has become a very personal quest for all of you guys to get this done, so.
So the next one was in 1.4. So this was Ron's, I think. So new development will blend with existing areas to create a unified neighborhood in both look and feel.
Check.
Okay. And then this was just a leftover. And so, let's see, residents of West Newport find convenient mobility to other parts of the city and the region. That gets back to AJ's kind of connectivity piece. So those were all I added, and then there was Cougar Mountain Trailhead is expanded to be a neighborhood and regional destination. That's one of the measures of success.
Anything else that pops up?
And I had
One other thing, and this may or may not be a thought that's worthwhile. We've done a lot of work, so we no longer have these problems now, but we used to have a lot of flooding issues in various parts of town, and so in my vision of success, we just consider that, which of course we have regulations that help us with that, but my view of success would be that there may still be some flooding, but if it happens, it occurs in natural areas that are designed for that to be able to happen and not creating damage to buildings and things like that.
Would that be in here?
I mean, it could go into sustainable. I don't.
Again, I think
So,
that,
so
much
Alice
like
might be a
view
problem.
corridors.
Alice?
Atlas?
Alice.
Yeah.
Might
Just, it might.
designed for it, right?
Well, now that Atlas is elevated,
Yes.
The garage isn't.
yeah, but the garage is
Garage is not critical.
So we'll tell folks that when their cars are underwater.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's not official, but what other area would this be?
Actually, you know, they didn't allow pathways for pedestrians out except for through floodwaters and that. So, because it wasn't a requirement. So if it floods, there's no way to get in or into or out of the building that is out of the floodwaters. And I doubt this is the place to change that, but flooding is a concern. Safety is a concern, and I don't see much in safety in this because it just seems so broad throughout the city, but that happened.
There's a whole nother whole nother section that talks about kind of sustainability and climate resilience and that kind of thing, right? So I don't know if it needs to be put in.
No, it's just we don't have any rules to make it so that you don't have to walk through floodwaters when you build. So the reality is that's what happened.
Right.
And we're talking about the same areas and the same places of flooding, and it will happen again because there's no rules saying you have to do it any differently. And anyway, move on. You'll never get that done in here.
So unless we're going to put something on there, we are going to move on to, okay.
Okay, so this was new. So we added kind of a tie-together paragraph on the Regional Growth Center before we split off into Pickering and Gilman. And, you know, I took this paragraph from somewhere, and it had green necklace in it, so I highlighted that because if it turns into green network or green spiderweb or green moss, whatever it's turning into, I'll make sure we remember to update that. So this is here. Anybody? Okay. Oh, yeah.
I pulled up the file I sent you. So one thing was it will evolve into two neighborhoods. I switched that to it will consist of, because do we want it to be two neighborhoods? Or are we trying to say it's like four neighborhoods and we want it to evolve? I was just confused by evolve.
I think the intent of what I was trying to say was they're not two neighborhoods now. They're a bunch of strip malls and.
Oh, so you meant evolve and just become a neighborhood?
Yeah.
Okay.
But if you've got some other language, I'm more than happy to swap.
I just wanted to comment that one of the things I liked about this was it's
Steve,
more.
when did you get here?
I just hang on to that.
Oh my God.
One of the things I liked about this, it was more specific, that it talks about density and growth and becoming. I'd like to see some of that language move to our vision instead of talking about prosperity. It talks about more specific, tangible things like denser plant growth, building height. That language should be moved to our vision and not where we talk about prosperity, because that's intangible as far as who's financially prospering and how the city's prospering. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Any other changes?
So when I split this apart, whoever thought that was a good idea? It became clear there was maybe some pieces that were not included. So, for example, now that we're specifically talking about Pickering, you know, it seems like we needed to say, you know, this is the home of our biggest employer, and it's hopefully always going to be the neighborhood of our biggest employer, and that's going to drive a lot of what happens in Pickering. So, so I added that sentence. We talked about
What did you mean by tenure?
rental or ownership. So we
Is
want.
that clear to other people? I thought that had some sort of wonky definition. Is tenure, like when I read tenure, I thought of like length of age of the building.
Okay, I will look that up in the dictionary and see if I've used it accurately.
I'm not
There's a
saying
good
I'm
chance
not,
I have not.
I'm not saying use it inaccurately. I'm just saying I think people won't know what you mean by 10 years.
Okay,
think you
I
mean a
will,
different-
I'll seek out maybe a better word. The intent was that we are hoping for both rental and ownership units within this neighborhood. Now, for those of you who were part of the conversations about housing strategies, we found out this week the draft legislation to change the condo liability laws
Next year.
died because Seattle thinks it's just fine the way it is. Because they're building condos in Seattle. So that's unfortunate, and we're going to have to swing at it again next session. But at least for now, all that, what seemed like a lot of good energy to potentially get us condominiums again in the near term has petered out, petersoned out.
If everybody contacts their legislator and tells them that we need to have this, that would be good.
Yeah. All right.
Is a question, I guess, and maybe a bit off scope, but is there a way of, I know we're not doing zoning, but is there a way to reserve some spots for condos or owned housing that?
No, we can't mandate either rental or ownership. We can put regulations on heights and densities, but not whether it's ownership or rental. Unless we want to get sued.
Nope.
So in the paragraph that was in the Word document you emailed, which looks very different than that paragraph.
Really?
Yeah. You open in with Pickering with its connectedness to Lake Sammamish State Park and East Lake neighborhood and some other stuff like that.
Really?
Yeah.
And I sent today?
Yeah. No, the Word document that you sent a couple days ago that I put comments on and sent back. So
Okay.
I thought it was this document, but this looks different than the one I'm looking at now.
Because I know Kristen sent one last week with the agenda, and then I sent a new one that you had requested, I think yesterday or today.
Yes.
The week is blurring
I'm looking
together.
at the one that Kristen sent out, so I
Okay.
think that's what.
I'm not sure where that
Irregardless.
one was.
In the future, there's no mention of Lake Sammamish State Park and its connectedness.
So I got the connectedness to East Lake neighborhood.
Yeah, it's right before it.
Oh, it's right
Where?
before that. Right here.
Okay. I'm good, I'm sorry.
So
Just
Keith,
confused by my version control.
not quite off the
Yeah, I
hook
don't
yet.
like to be.
Wouldn't expect to be.
So I had a couple suggestions, things that I don't see in the document that I think it should be there. Looking at mid-rise, I think it should be mid-rise mixed-use housing, because when you say mid-rise housing, it's like there's no mixed use in that formula. Right? So
we've got mixed use definitely in Gilman. Do we want,
In Gilman,
Do we want
because there's a
mixed use?
mandate for it in
Yeah.
Gilman.
is the vision for Pickering also to have mixed use?
So this one's a little bit, so what I would say is this one's a little bit of a finer thread in that you guys have language in there about no net loss of square footage or jobs, right? So if I was going to take out big lots, right, I would have to do apartments with commercial or retail on the ground floor to replace the number of jobs or the square footage. So I would do mixed use there. But let's take a different example and say, I'm just going to take out a big swath of Lowe's parking lot, right? If I was going to do that, then I could just do an apartment building or a condominium building where there used to be just a surface parking lot if I wasn't taking out any jobs. So I don't know how much we want to differentiate Pickering from Gilman, because they're kind of weirdly Siamese twins. But I don't have a problem if the commission feels like they'd rather that say mixed-use mid-rise, or mid-rise housing mostly in a mixed-use form. I mean, if I can do that, if you guys want that in here, I'm open.
Not worried about what you call it. I
think I'm good with it because it's immediately followed by commercial and retail vibrancy.
yeah,
So
okay.
I personally think building a few mixed-use buildings would be great, but I think if the buildings are not mixed-use, but there's still a lot of housing and retail, that's fine, so.
Okay. I had a couple other things here to talk about, and that was, and commercial and retail employment and a youth center will provide daytime vibrancy and evening sports and leisure opportunities for youth to seniors.
So you are wanting a youth center put in here.
Do we want to commit that to a
Well,
specific
not
neighborhood?
necessarily a youth center, but something to provide leisure opportunities for youth to seniors. Because that's going to be a lot of people living in one little space, and if they don't have a place to meet.
Isn't this state park across the street?
Yeah, but it rains in
About
the
create a
state
daytime vibrancy, comma, for youth through seniors, comma.
Or just for all ages or something like that?
Yeah.
That was partly why we were going to try and make Pickering Barn and Farm have more
park. Well, that's fine.
going on there, because that's
a
right
good
there.
way- That's a great way to
Yeah.
do it.
But I think that's still in the, isn't that still in the,
We have some language about making Pickering more active.
Actually, with that mention of Pickering, I don't see it in that future.
Other than the
Section?
giant word Pickering? No, just
Well,
kidding.
Pickering
No,
Barn.
I know. All right, I will add something about the farm.
But are we
But
putting
before I-
all of the green necklace stuff in this? Because we haven't, up to this point, we had it sort of separated out in the green parks element, right? It's almost a separate overlay. So
Yeah.
if you start adding it in here, it seems like you have to then start adding it in elsewhere. If you had something that maybe wouldn't be in that green necklace, like, you know, daytime vibrancy for all ages, that wouldn't necessarily be in the green necklace. That makes sense to me, but not to start identifying components in the parks, personally.
Well, I think in other ones, we've named out Confluence and Tibbetts Valley and things that are amenities for the people of that area, things that are very specific, and talk about what this area is. And talking about Pickering Barn and the amenity that it provides to residents.
Pickering Park is up there in the current, right? Pickering Park is a strong feature for events in summertime public market, but it is underutilized.
Right here.
Yeah.
Yep, so we should have an answer to that in the future section. It says, how are we going to utilize it better?
Yeah, like an active Pickering Park or something like that. Just throw it in
and I
there.
think the real name is
Amphitheater and
Farm.
stormwater ponds.
Yep.
Okay.
The only thing I see there is you're concentrating, not putting an onus back on the developers. And I still think that they need, to, just like Gateway, you did specify that they had a communal area. I think you need to leave room that the developers are also accountable within their land to provide that. So where Pickering is going to be a broader use, the local ones can use it, but it's going to be more of a public, a far outreaching facility. And that is part of the new Pickering. They need to have some of their own communal spaces.
So you're going to think in this part?
Well, we did in Gateway. We did in Gateway, you mentioned that, so I think in here, if you're going to put something, it should be that livability, or the, you know, for all ages should be part of the development and mixed use area.
That's fine, but in this part, are you happy with what it says here? And then you can go into the, whatever you want to call this. It's open.
So Keith, I wasn't quite done yet.
I'm not moving
But
yet.
I think this is good. We're focusing a lot on day, and I think there should be also evening. But the other thing is leisure, evening leisure activities, because
Doesn't the nighttime activity cover
Yeah.
that? If you've got daytime, nighttime, I think that covers evening.
I suppose you could. I just want to make sure we protect a place or give a place for people to take their dates. It's going to be a very boring neighborhood.
Want to be a romantic neighborhood?
It could be a romantic neighborhood. You know, that addressed the flooding issues too. Yeah.
So if you got rid of beautiful green necklace, that might need to be a sentence all to itself, though it totally blows that sentence out of the water. What you're actually looking for is Pickering Park is multifaceted. What we're doing is we're just expanding the park system to be to serve all in a larger variety of ways. It's such a, with the state park and Pickering Farm there and the walking corridor linkages and the green necklace, it just seems like there's too much to pull out without just getting in the weeds. And I would be happier just to have a better description indicating improvement in the green necklace. And then when you go down to the actual actions, then call them out. I don't want to waste the words in this calling out each item individually. They might. Are you guys happy with just a better descriptive sentence?
I think it's fine as is.
Yeah, I think it needs to be called out. I think if we don't, then saying that this is Pickering seems a little empty.
Okay.
I don't like all, it should be the whole community or something. Okay.
So I've got something different. Pickering is dominated by Costco's corporate headquarters. I think that's too strong. He's like anchored by. I don't.
It may be true.
Well, but I don't think we want it to be true. We don't want an 8-story Costco building to dominate the surroundings. It can anchor the neighborhood, but I don't. I think we want stuff of comparable scale.
He could use
also.
the word anchors. Mr. Economic Development and anchor. Anchor.
Okay.
Another suggestion here, we haven't really addressed Mountains of Sound Gateway or the Mountains of Sound Corridor. And although that could be part of the green necklace discussion, which we may want to overlay this, would it be appropriate to put that in here that this may accommodate the Mountains of Sound Corridor? Or is this not the right place?
I don't know that it's the right place. I mean, so the question is, the green necklace, and I'm looking at Trish because she saw it later than I have, but their map, clearly the Mountains to Sound Corridor is a prominent feature on the green network plan. So
Isn't it south of 90, not north of 90?
Yeah.
it is south. At least it is on the plan.
Yeah, none of that's really been defined yet. I think that's what our discussion with the Parks Department is going to be about the green necklace, is to help define that too.
But so I think it's a part of the green necklace in some form. And so like if you've got green necklace called out here, I think that covers.
Right, when you guys fix that, in fact, they're meeting on Monday, if any of you are interested in going. They're still working on it without us. But once you fit what you work on in here, then it will be covered.
Okay. It's fair.
Just on the Costco being the city's largest employer, I agree. Hopefully they will always be, but I think Issaquah is open to the idea of having another comparable Costco.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't think you should spell out the home of the city's largest employer per se, because that limits somebody that might be bigger as a potential future tenant. Major.
You can probably just get rid of
They
that.
are so far out in front
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you, it will take us decades for somebody to catch them,
Why don't
even
you just-
with me doing hard work. But I will,
How about
Try
just
during your-
national headquarters? Because that's pretty special, that we are the national headquarters of Costco.
Yeah, I think you can just get rid of the as the home of cities. You can just have, say, Pickering is anchored by Costco's corporate headquarters.
Oh, I like that.
I don't think you need the prelude.
Anchored by. Just
This is also the other side of SR 900, right?
the other side, the 56th side?
Yeah,
Yeah?
it's in this, right?
Yeah.
That's missing.
It's called
It's
out
up
below.
here.
Yeah.
56 and I-90 create noisy and difficult barriers to pedestrians and bicycles.
Yes, good.
Yeah.
Now let's, how about the future of it?
We
It's
did- we-
connected to Lake Commander State
We didn't
Park.
figure it out, apparently.
Yeah, so,
Yeah, I think convenient connectedness, I think, has that covered.
Well,
Well, the other thing we said on those, in the business area, that those could be more geared towards the state park and enhance amenities and support the state park is what was part of the task force. It's what we saw that to be.
so it's less direct, Connie. I mean, so obviously you have to cross 56 to get to the park and to get to East Lake, because where Microsoft and FedEx are is East Lake.
right. But I'm talking about Motel 6, the gas station and all that is in this. So
It is.
I have a question for everyone. Is everyone expecting that other side where Motel 6, the gas station, and the corporate places are to also turn into this somehow?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and their park or their amenities and their feeling is also going to be this housing thing. I just don't feel like that is very houseable wedged in right by the freeway there. So I actually, in my brain, segregated that into a slightly different, more business-style neighborhood with small retail. So,
Yeah, we're not going to create another neighborhood.
no, I'm not. The whole neighborhood in your brain has to be that homogeneous?
So I don't think there's, I mean, I think Timberlake Apartments, which is just down the street and is as close to I-90 as the properties that we're talking about, is clearly an occupied housing project that's recently been built. You know, what we talk about is that we're trying to also diminish the kind of the adverse residential impacts of the freeway by having, you know, some sort of noise attenuation included. You know, what that would do would be to hopefully improve the likelihood that some housing could be at least considered for the west side of SR 900.
Okay, so at minimally, how are those people going to get to their retail places? They have to be able to get across
56 or 900.
900. And I don't see getting across 900 here or the connectivity between those two neighborhoods emphasized as a thing that needs to change or happen. But
Maybe take the
you do up
sentence
top.
that's in Gilman that talks about handling the 900 and bring it an
it's the
issue.
same thing.
Yeah. So maybe just review what that sentence was, because I think that handled it for the southern portion.
I think if we go to the option 2 construct, this will be a lot easier. So this goes to, do we want to do it as a paragraph or do we want to do it as a bunch of sections? I think if we broke this into a bunch of sections, these kind of connectivity issues would be a lot easier to specify, so.
Well, I don't mind the paragraphedness, I just think that SR 9, it was just left out. So if you guys are happy with it having the same tone, And I'm happy with the connectedness.
Any comments? Ron?
Ron, can we move on?
No comments, leaving
Yes,
it the way it is?
move on.
Okay.
Okay.
I have to ask this, does anybody have anything different? Everybody's happy with that.
Well, no, but
So I don't remember why I didn't do this as red line. So for example, we talked about changing the non-residential square footage to jobs or. We spent a bunch of time talking about that.
Question under 4.5 of the, I guess it's Angus development, but does that include solar panel projects? And if not, could or should?
It could. So it's not specific to solar panels. It's basically telling them they have to do something that is green in their building. It could be solar panels. It could be increased insulation. It could be triple pane glazed
Okay,
windows.
So it's not just, let's say, a green rooftop specifically, but, okay, thank you.
But it also doesn't say it has to be more than one thing or two things. It's a low bar.
It's a bar, though. There was no bar there before, right? I mean, it was all about encourage.
I think that's code.
And now you have to do something. So sometimes it's about moving the needle a bit.
Ron?
Is there another spot that defines green building elements?
So we have a green building initiative thing that we just passed. So, yes.
Okay, so is this saying refer to that and include something from that meets those guidelines, or could you just say planted a tree? Check.
So
I
a
don't know. I
tree's
guess I'm
not
trying
a
to make sure that this
building
is
thing.
right.
So what we would want to make sure is look at the glossary on the CIP and make sure that it mentions green building.
I mean, like low impact development, right? For example, is low impact development, stormwater management is required. That is
Right.
considered a green building element, and therefore all projects comply without going above and beyond that.
No. So we will cross-reference the green building initiatives so that they will look at the right document.
Under city implementation actions, far left, second bullet, would that make more sense to say SR 56 than 90, since it's Pickering, not Gilman?
Instead of SR 900?
Say 56? We in Gilman now?
We're in Pickering.
Yeah.
56 SR 900 and 900.
Yeah.
You know, that street has like 12 names.
Sixth, they're calling it Sammamish, Northwest Sammamish Road now the whole way. They changed the sign. It no longer says 56.
Really?
I noticed that.
Vandals.
I don't know who does that. They
City
just do it. And then, so,
Okay.
what does facilitate access to the state park mean as a developer obligation?
Which number is that?
3.5. No, I need new glasses, so I'll do this. Thanks.
So,
Scared him again.
Hey, Keith, before you answer that question.
yeah.
I have something that ties directly into that, strengthens that. Down at the bottom of connectedness, you have third bullet, crossing 900 is less of a barrier for pedestrians and bicyclists. Doesn't say it does anything. I'm thinking we create a safe and friendly non-motorized crossing of 900. And while we're that, because we have a major pathway that goes on the west side of 900, but you have to go through a very busy intersection to get to the other side, and that is not a pedestrian-friendly intersection.
I think that's, I mean, that bullet's in the measures of success, and to me, that is a measure of success statement, not an action. There are actions that should lead to that. That statement, to me, reads as a good measure of success.
Because I don't, Ron, I don't think we want to prescribe that it's going to be a grade separated crossing. It could also involve street narrowing and something like that.
The 900? At that intersection, you're going to narrow the street? It's gonna
No,
get
but
wider.
we've got that, we've got similar language in Gilman, so. Also, I think, wouldn't it be more relevant to say crossing in 50, my same comment before, 56th? Because I think that bullet was from, this was when Pickering and Gilman together.
That Connie mentioned, the part across from 900, that's the Motel 6 and the, at least that's
Yeah.
what I pictured it to.
Yes.
Oh, I see, I read that as, what's more important is making sure that Northeast 56th is permeable for pedestrians and bicyclists.
Well, I think they're both
Oh,
important,
yeah.
depending on which,
But if we're talking about this other neighborhood, the Motel 6 neighborhood, that is a terrible crossing.
So, so there's another city action here. It's actually in the Costco Development Agreement, but it doesn't talk about prioritizing peds and bikes, or not prioritizing, but at least considering them significantly. So I think this, I want to keep this down here. I think it's good as a measure of success, but I think the missing piece was the action on how to get there.
And that same bullet could also tie the language into Connie's point, the connection to State Park, because that State Park entrance is going to be right there as well.
Maybe. We don't know that yet.
Yeah.
I'd say facilitate access across
So
56th, or whatever it's called now. Also needs a city implementing action of some sort.
well, that's
Because
that.
right now, you can't get across 56th or Sammamish Road to get to the state park, except for long, long blocks. So somebody has got to make sure you can get across the street easily on 56th. And so when you say facilitate access to State Park, is the intent that the developer is going to be having to create intersections every 200 feet to get across to the state park?
No.
Okay, so what does that mean then?
So right now, you have from Pickering, I think you have 3 ways to get to the state park. You have 12th Avenue, which is horrible. You have 10th Avenue, which is the traffic light where the espresso and the vet place is. And that's okay. And then you have the trail that goes underneath the 56, which is stinky. And those are, there's a sewer vent.
Sammamish's sewer vents.
Underneath, well, apparently it's Metros now, because we were going to go after Sam Platt, and apparently it's Metros now. But that's on Sheldon's homework list, because you have this great trail crossing, and it's stinky. So
Floods.
so the idea is, right now you have kind of 3 ways to get to the state park. And hopefully all of those crossings will be either maintained or improved. And so what you expect from the developer is connectivity to those crossings, right? So if you've got a project in Pickering and you know people are going to want to get, and you're over on, say, the PCC or Tully side, assuming that doesn't get wiped out by some new traffic configuration, having your project have ped and bike access out to 12th would be how you facilitate that connection.
That's not very pervious. That's a long distance between those intersections for pets. So no, that doesn't, to me, facilitate access. We already have those. We need to improve the access to the state park, and all that does is maybe mildly improve it. So that seems weak.
All right.
City implementing actions to that same consideration. Does the city have any responsibilities for making 56th more porous for bikes and pets?
And to Connie's point, specifically where the East Lake Sammamish Trail crosses 56. I don't know if this is the right conversation for that, because
So,
that's more.
no, because that's a different
infrastructure.
neighborhood. That's in East Lake.
It's in East Lake?
Lake Sammamish Trail?
That is part of Pickering.
No. Stops at the creek. Pickering goes to the creek.
Oh, you're right. Next conversation.
Yep.
Scratch.
Trying to keep us in a box. All right, so go ahead.
On
Carrie.
your measures of success, take out the sentence about Mall Street because it is not in this neighborhood.
Not unless it moved.
No.
North Mall Street.
And then I think you have this bullet in Gilman, but not Pickering. You can have it in both under connectedness or connected, have us measured success. The Sound Transit Station connects the neighborhood to the greater region.
No.
Very walkable and bikeable neighborhood in Issaquah, as long as you can't get across the streets. I have to ask everyone, have you all tried getting across 56 to get to the state park?
It is hard.
Yes.
Do you,
Yeah, I've done that walk
do you
before.
think that is how it should be in the future with that placement of crosswalks? Is that good enough?
No. That's a terrible intersection.
I'm talking about the corridor, right? Because you're going basically from the point all the way to where Pickering Farm ends. I guess I'm
What's your-
troublemaking because I'm trying to figure out if we want a biking, walkable, connected to Lake Sammamish State Park area, and Keith just described the crossings that exist will be the crossings that they intend to have and no more. Is that enough?
I don't think this document is prescribing a specific solution for pedestrian crossings at 56th.
Well, I was asking about his intent, the intent when he described, sorry, Keith, when I said developer facilitating getting to the state park, and he basically said make it nicer to get across those existing intersections.
And you're saying.
I'm saying,
you're
I think
asking.
we need, I'll pitch it. I don't think that's going to make a biking, walking connection because those are far apart and it's ugly. And even if they make it nicer, it's really hard and wide and the cars go fast. So I think there needs to be more if you actually want to really connect the neighborhood to the state park. But I am one voice in the wilderness out here because Keith doesn't want to. So I just want to know what you all think.
That's two voices.
Two voices in the wilderness.
I think it really depends on how the state park redevelops their entrance and how open they make themselves to the city. And if we work within that situation, we'll be able to determine if there are more crossings and entrances that we need to open up to crossings. But I think at this point, with the way that it is developed, that's fine. And I really don't think there's a way to add that into this document.
Yeah, I guess I would like to see more pedestrian-friendly crossings, and if you look at design, those actually are moved away from key intersections so that you don't have turning traffic and that sort of thing. So I really think we can add that we need specifically pedestrian bike crossings that will connect with the state park. that would be separate from existing ones.
So Keith, can you come up with some suggestive language?
Well, we've got
What?
something in there on the bullet that says lessen barriers of SR 956 and I-90 for pedestrians and bicyclists.
And we also say that it needs to be very walkable and bikeable, so that means that it needs to be better than now. I don't think this is the right document or venue to start solutioning how we improve crossings of 56th Street. I think it needs to get better, and the document specifies that.
I think the language won't get you your measure of success.
Vehicle-free crossing.
It's not going to happen. So I think for you guys,
Actually-
if you want, I mean, I would think of this way. Right now, Pickering has its back to 56th. And that's the way it was developed. It was developed as a kind of an internal project that's more oriented to those internal streets. And so, the bigger question here from an urban design standpoint is, do you expect when Pickering redevelops that there are buildings fronting on 56th? Because if there are front doors on 56, you've now changed what the whole character of that street is. And I would be more inclined to agree with Connie that, yeah, now you have to talk about, if that's the front of a project, its front needs to relate to the park across the street, and how do you do that?
But I think as Lindsay said, I think that really matters what the park does first.
And that's,
I would disagree with that because the park is there now. So if Pickering develops, and I'm going to work with Connie and Mary on this, if Pickering develops and we have a couple thousand people moving in there, we're going to ask those people to cross the street, cross 56th. 56 is already a very, very busy and very dangerous street to cross. I do not feel safe crossing it.
So there's dozens of people that cross every day, because I see them, because I work there, because they're coming from Costco over to the retail to get lunch or to go to Tully's. And so, but it's not a pleasant experience. I don't think anybody in this room would say crossing 56 is fun or convenient to do. But people are doing it now.
So
I think
why
what we're
would-
saying is we want to improve those crossings, so that people have choices. Right now, if you don't want to battle the cars, you take the trail underneath the street that goes past Pickering Barn. That's a choice. If you're more, trying to go directly, you might choose 12th Avenue, and that's a choice. So the question about whether there's more opportunities to cross than at 12th, and I think 11th doesn't have a crosswalk because of I think they took the C curb out, but there used to be C curb out there separating the HOV lane. So I mean, if you guys as a group feel like we need more crossings of 56th, then it should say that.
I think there needs to be more crossings, and they need to be vehicle-free crossings for pedestrians.
Okay, so that's a whole different animal. So who's building grade-separated crossings?
I don't know that like they're saying, we don't need to design it, but I think we need to figure out language that creates porous 56th, and this language does not create a porous 56th for pedestrians and bikes, to my brain.
Can you just take the sentence we have for SR 900 is less of a barrier for pedestrians, bicyclists? Say the same thing about 56. Isn't that what we're trying to do?
Except for we just had the conversation with Keith about all the language that we had, and he is sort of insisting that that's not going to change anything except for to make the existing crossings somewhat nicer to get across. So it doesn't sound like the language is getting us where we want to go, but I have said the same thing 8 times, and you have said the same thing 8 times, and so maybe I'll just try pounding in another place at another time.
Well, Joan and Rob haven't said anything.
I think it covers what it has to cover, and I think that the developments are going to come in and change a lot of things, and I think the city, at least I'm hoping the city will look at each development and see if there's a possibility of putting in new crossings. I personally don't care if there's another crossing. I just want to make sure that the crossing that's there is safe. And the only way I think you can do that is put a bridge over. And so there's, even if you put a crossing down further, you're still going to be crossing traffic. You're still going to have that. So as long as at least the ones that are there are made safer, I would be fine with it. So I don't think it needs to have extra crossings in this document. I thought.
I think people, depending on where the main entrance ends up being, and I don't know all the other little entrance points along the way there, but I think people are from Pickering generally traveling west. So if within Pickering there's kind of this way to travel west towards where the main entrance is, and having that 12th crossing at 12th be the one that's the safest, I guess, kind of makes sense to me to get you closest to the main entrance. No, if you're trying to like kind of funnel people, if people are generally, whether they're traveling north and then west or west and then north, I don't know, I guess it would be interesting to know how people, with kind of the vision for, because we're going to make it a smaller grid, right? We want it to be a smaller grid inside. Those people are going to travel somehow through that grid to the park. I guess wherever that primary point wants to be needs to be the safest.
Well, and we supposedly have every 300 feet we have a thing?
Yeah.
A crossing, a block.
Well, I'm not hearing a lot of consensus here. How about a compromise? Enhanced crossing.
I think it's already there. They're seeing an intent that I don't think will be realized. I think that's just the point.
Okay, for city implementing actions, rather than lessen barriers, how about enhanced crossings of? So that's city implementing actions, first column, rather than lessen barriers of, enhanced crossings of.
Or pedestrians and bicyclists.
What's there? It's there.
It says 2. Say 4.
I like that.
Next.
And that could mean added crossings at some point in time.
We want to add equestrians to that? I'm just kidding.
Well, I thought that was going to take all of 10 minutes, and it's taken an hour and a half, so let's get on to going.
My one ask on this one is that you remove the word small town on the promenade for Mall Street. Successful small town promenade in your urban.
I agree. I had the same
Is
comment.
that in the future?
Yeah, it's in the future.
Bottom sentence.
Very last.
Yep.
Okay, moving on. We haven't even gotten to tonight's agenda yet.
And in this one, under city implementing actions, take out the relocate entrance to the state park, because that's in the other neighborhood.
Didn't say I got them all, or even maybe half.
And then can you add the same sound transit station connects neighborhood to greater region under measure of success? Thanks.
And the no flooding comment applies here, too.
The what?
No flooding.
I'm going to just write that down, Carrie.
As does adding Gilman to the lesson barriers, because one of the hardest streets to get across is Gilman. And frankly, so is Newport Way. Hard to get across.
Really?
Yes.
Newport Way? Yes.
Yeah.
It's just a 2-lane road in Gilman.
Newport at Gilman.
Oh, and Mall. There's Mall. I'm thinking of Newport Way, mid-block crossing at Mall. Everybody oh yeah, Maple, sorry. Yeah, Mall is easy.
Yes.
Maple's hard. You have mid-block crossings with people dashing across between the hotel and the Mall Street building.
Including UPS.
Right. Basically, any main road is too large of a grid currently to make it so that people get it pedestrian friendly. Yeah. I don't know how you address all of that.
Yeah, I think you've already got somewhere in there about reducing the block sizes, and where you have those opportunities to reduce the block sizes, you have additional crossing opportunities in
Yeah,
the
so
future.
maybe just adding Gilman. Yeah, reducing speed would do it.
Yeah, we're not going to
Really
do that here.
want lesson barriers?
They've got a Gilman project right now. We'll let them have that fun there.
Yeah. Change that one
Yeah,
to
we'll
enhanced
take the
crossings.
lesson out of there. Not enhanced barriers.
So what Mary just said, every time you put in enhanced crossings, you're also removing the other ways to make it easier to cross, and one of those is to, one, reduce the road width, and two, to reduce the speed limit. And both of those make it safer for pedestrians to get across. So those aren't all enhanced crossings. So
Safer crossings?
safer crossings.
Sure.
Safer, more pleasant, I don't know. But if Gilman was 25 miles an hour, you could actually see where you were going, and you could get across the street, and it would become more of people would move to the retail areas on either side, but at its current speed limit, it's hard. And it's hard to walk along because it's unpleasant, so.
On city implemented actions, the first bullet, providing monitoring and maintenance of creeks and wetlands, I just think this is something that's in the larger green necklace thing throughout the document, not necessarily specifically in.
No, it's part of development.
Why wouldn't you want that to happen throughout the city, throughout the whole central Issaquah plan?
You do, but
We've got it in, I think we've got it in every neighborhood.
Okay. And if anything, I would like to enhance that. Who has responsibility for maintaining the natural green or the natural beauty throughout this whole document? I think that's part of this document as a whole as well.
So who did you want to do that?
I want the city to do that.
It's under city implementing actions. So
That provides monitoring and maintenance of creeks and wetlands.
it's the city.
Okay, so, is anybody else?
Okay, we're going to go to East Lake and Confluence. All right,
Save.
save. Yes, sir.
This is a conversation about whether or not we want Gilman to be part of Eastlake or Confluence.
Yes. Yes?
So I think the Gilman should be part of Confluence, but maybe call it the Gilman Retail Strip.
So Gilman Village?
Yeah, Gilman Village is, its characteristic is different than Confluence, but if we add it to Eastlake, then it's a very different look and feel.
Yeah, I couldn't remember when you guys talked about it.
we
I
had
couldn't
that
remember where it
conversation.
landed.
It landed
Okay.
in Confluence.
All right, I'll stick it in Confluence.
Yeah, so then there's a few corrections to both Eastlake
Right.
and Confluence.
Okay.
And I don't necessarily know that I would agree with Confluence as being a mixed-use neighborhood.
You don't think it is?
Overall, yeah.
That
This
doesn't
is
mean
in
the
future.
structures are mixed use, it just means that there's residential and
And
commercial and
right.
retail in the neighborhood.
If that's considering the Gilman Retail Strip, then yeah, that's good. I just don't want to see, I don't think it's appropriate to see mixed-use, mid-rise buildings.
No, one of the implementing actions, Ron, just to remind you, is that the city was going to initiate code revisions to ensure this neighborhood retains its role as a less dense, smaller scaled neighborhood. So the whole idea was this needs to kind of get downzoned, but we would have to do that as a subsequent action assuming the vision got adopted.
Yeah, I'm gonna go on a limb, Ron. I think your problem with that is the mid-rise component, not the mixed-use component. And I think that jives with what's in the document.
Yeah, well, you just called it out here, so I just wanted clarification, but if that's the spirit of where we're going, then I'm in agreement.
Does it say mid-rise somewhere?
No, it says
Okay,
smaller mixed use will be
Yeah.
ideal transition.
okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Can I go back to your Eastlake document and the map
The one that actually has a map?
of the area?
Let's see, I think I have to go to here. Hang on, sorry. Gilman, Pickering, sorry, Regional Growth Center, Confluence, Eastlake, map.
There.
Yeah.
Why is the southern border on the south side of I-90? It feels like that those are kind of orphaned properties, because to get them to feel like a part of that neighborhood with I-90 going through the middle of them and not being connected with the light rail station in that section, they just feel like orphans.
So I think part of why we talked about including this in Eastlake and not Confluence is because the character on the south side of Gilman is a lot different than what's happening on the north side. So right now, I don't disagree with you, Carrie. It's a little, I-90 definitely feels like a, where you should draw the split. So 4th Avenue does help. The fact that 4th Avenue does provide a vehicular crossing of I-90, and then the King County Trail provides a bike and ped crossing kind of mid-block, if you will. The hope is also that the IJR will turn this into less of a monster. I don't know if it will, but the hope would be that it will. I don't know if that means that you would then be able to walk this a little bit better. So when you talk about, you've got the post office, you've got the medical center that's kind of dying back in the back. You've got Madison Development's property that's got a for lease sign on it.
I just think like when you're visualizing the axis of the neighborhood, in the northern part it's very much like Spanish Parkway, but when you get to the south, it's not as much the Parkway as it is 4th Avenue.
Gotcha.
And in that sense, it kind of spills across
I
90.
can see that. Thank you.
Keith, every time I see one of these maps, I'm not really sure exactly where the boundary is. It just seems like it's drawn right through the middle of a set of trees. Is there a clearer way to distinguish exactly which side of the road this is on?
So what I would say is, I'll try to explain what I understand. So here's the creek. So the creek runs up here, splits Pickering and Eastlake. And then you have 56, which then we've included this area, which is where the Microsoft office buildings are, Siemens and what used to be Space Labs and the FedEx and the courthouse, BMC's over here, so.
Because you're doing it by
that's-
parcel, right? Those are all parcel boundaries, correct?
They're parcel boundaries. The conversation that happened at Land and Shore, which we haven't even started talking about, is kind of this jagged east edge. There was some conversation at committee about kind of looking at whether some of these properties, like this one particularly, belong in central Issaquah, or should they not? And so, to Joan's question of what parcels or what areas have we included?
No, I just wanted the boundaries defined a little bit better.
So we can add the names of the streets, or
What you need to do is blow it up so that you can see where it goes.
I think, can you just zoom in? Is that what you need?
Yeah, well,
okay. So
Are you asking,
I'm gonna-
like, why did he choose the other side of Gilman Boulevard? Or if indeed he did choose the other side of Gilman Boulevard as the boundary? Is that like your
No.
question?
no, I just want to know what streets make the boundary. So if I'm a builder and I have to know if I'm in Confluence or East
Right.
Lake, and I need to know what that boundary is. I can't tell from that picture.
I'll ask Kristen to work on clearer maps.
Okay.
She'd be happy to, right, Trish? All right.
Keith, you referenced in the interchange, you said IJR or something like that?
It's called an interchange justification report. So WashDOT has funded the interchange justification report for Front Street and I-90. And because Gilman hits Front Street at such a funky angle, it really doesn't flow traffic very well. And so what happens right now in the evening or in the PM peak is, traffic will back up on Gilman all the way back to Gilman Village. And so part of what we've been asking WashDOT to do is to look at redesigning this interchange to not only improve flow for traffic getting on and off the freeway, but also to improve what it functions like on the city streets. So that interchange justification report is underway. I vaguely remember which consultant was chosen to do it. Let's say it might be Berger ABAM. I don't know. But anyway, it's also going to go back. So the most important part to me personally is it's going to examine the freeway from Front Street all the way back to 12th and where the potential crossing will be in between SR 900 and Front Street. So, this unknown of where that crossing is going to be, is it going to be a Jack in the Box? Is it going to be somewhere else? That will get decided by this WashDOT report, which will then help potentially funnel down that conversation about where the train station is going to go. So, super exciting. All that stuff is starting, and it starts with the WashDOT piece.
So are they looking to decide whether or not there's an interchange, or just redesign it?
Redesign.
Okay.
They
So
will
it's
not take.
it's not like they're going to justify it and say, oh, we don't need this interchange anymore?
No, definitely no.
Whether or not they're going to put millions of dollars into making a change to it.
Right.
Will there be a public comment process for that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
City Council is already starting to address it.
Yes, Ron?
Question for you, the boundary, why does it include 66th Place and 66th Street? It seems like a really odd
Is that down here?
Yeah. 'Cause it's
Okay.
one parcel, it looks like one parcel or two parcels that are, and the rest of it is,
So we
Different area.
took the service neighborhood out. Remember, we drove back in there and said, yeah, this really doesn't seem like Central Issaquah. I'll just go ahead and be blatant, why not? So this is potentially the location of a new auto dealership. And so as we talked about what design standards we would want for that auto dealership, whether we would want the Central Issaquah standards, which are very much more urban and ped-oriented as opposed to suburban, we said, let's keep it in Central Issaquah because these properties, because they're along Front Street or East Lake Sam as it comes out from underneath the freeway, they are, I think, visually very prominent, and having them in Central Issaquah made more sense for us, which is why we suggested including them. So yeah, it makes the boundary look a little wonky, but I think if you saw those properties redeveloped into something that was still suburban and not ped-oriented, I think we'd be doing a disservice to the East Lake neighborhood. Whereas if you get back into this area back in here, back past the gravel pit and into, where it's more industrial, I don't know that much of the city really interacts with that neighborhood too much. But because of the amount of traffic that's on East Lake Sam, this has a very different, I think, impact on how you perceive the city.
What is the,
sorry, quickly, that parcel you're talking about possibly being a dealership, you have a bike path going right through the middle of that. So
Yeah, we
you're
do.
talking about removing it?
It goes next to it.
To Preston.
Yeah,
It's
so
south
you're
of
going to
it.
squeeze that bike trail right up against the freeway.
Yeah.
No, we're not, I don't think we're going to move the bike trail.
It is. It is, isn't it?
Stay where it is.
It's
Yeah.
going to stay where it is?
Yeah. Move it.
Okay. It'll be interesting. Subaru's on one side and Ford's on the other.
what are the two little triangles that cut into what would otherwise be a pretty logical boundary? So there's the larger,
This one?
sure, so, no, not that are included in, that are out of,
So go to the right of the line.
yep,
Yeah.
so there.
Out here?
That's that marine boat place, a plumbing shop, and the two auto body shops.
So the little nose-shaped.
This thing?
There it is.
Yeah.
And the Unical. Oh, that.
At the nose.
Why wouldn't that be in?
So I don't know if this is, so Kristen drew this, so I'm
Doesn't
gonna,
have frontage to East Lake Sammamish Parkway.
I'm gonna guess that's a parcel boundary, John? I don't know, I don't have a parcel map up. We can pull a parcel viewer up if that would be a good thing to do.
No, I guess I'm just wondering, if it did get redeveloped, why wouldn't we want it in Central?
Can we just add this as a homework point to check why those lines were decided that way and maybe come back to us with a justification?
Yes.
Yeah, too.
So I've got a map up, just Google Maps here. So I think 230th Avenue should be the boundary. And that's what separates the gravel pit from.
We've got the creek that runs right through that parcel, that small triangle.
I see, so we're bumping up to the creek.
Between 229th and 230th, I don't think you redevelop anything anyway.
So I think the creek then should be the boundary.
Yep. Let's just get a justification so that we can come back to it.
Yeah, there's a creek that goes right through it.
That's the whole eastern edge, or whatever that is eastern. This side, top to bottom.
It would just seem like a little less like parcel cherry picking if it was a more like, if it was the creek boundary, then.
Or come
great.
back and tell us why you did what
Yep.
you did
All right.
Yep.
Enough.
specifically.
Moving on.
And then I think you can do that the same for that one neighborhood up toward the northeastern portion, whether or not that should be in.
That one?
Yeah, right there.
I think all of them, because there's a church and another property up at the top that has no reason to be in there, mainly steep slope.
But isn't the church and the other property, isn't that frontage onto East Lake?
So why? I don't know what you would gain from those parcels in this situation anyway. So I would still like an explanation as to why you would want those.
Well, I think if we're looking at BMC potentially redeveloping into something that's a little bit denser, then including the parcels that are nearby that have that same ability to develop toward that more urban environment, I think that makes sense. But
Well-
I'm perfectly fine with looking at a justification for some of those cutouts.
Right, because those are mainly steep slope. They're just a little bit at the bottom, and then you're backed right up to your forested hills.
Yeah, so that would be the question that we would kind of want to bring in, is maybe call out those ones and say, the question here is steep slope. The question there is, this is a neighborhood, and the reason this was chosen and those weren't was because creek or otherwise.
Yeah, we can do that. We'll bring a big map that we can unroll.
Great.
Big map, Trish.
Big map.
Especially since the city,
Bigger, we can do bigger than that, actually.
Yeah.
especially since the city council, since they requested why.
Yeah,
Yep.
We should have an answer for them.
yeah.
And the parcel behind Fred Meyer, we had a discussion
Yes.
about that at length to
This one?
include or exclude from this
Yes.
map.
Yep.
It
That's
was
the
included-
future hotel parcel?
The floating hotel.
And we decided to
floating
keep
hotel?
it in because it has more protections?
There,
Or less
More
protections?
so right now, there's more protections in central Issaquah than the rest of the city.
That's why we kept it, okay.
Yep. Now, on that idea, in the sustainable, one of the bullet points there says something about property owners will help maintain or build up the Black Nugget Wall,
What?
the East Lake.
Yeah,
Yeah. Work with property owner to preserve, oh, no.
to revegetate the hillside and replace the Black Nugget Wall?
That's the
Yeah.
city's job.
That's in the city's bucket.
Okay, so it's, the idea is work with them, not expect them to pay for that.
Well, okay, so. Before I talk, let me read.
That was county-owned, and then we annexed it, so we annexed the problem.
Yeah.
We annexed it. It was not county-owned. It was county jurisdiction. It was privately owned, and was an old quarry site, actually.
Who owns the wall?
Who owns the wall? Unfortunately, you do, as a taxpayer of Issaquah.
Yep.
Can we take it down? Just kidding.
We could take it down. It may come down by itself at some point.
You should take a lot of other things out at the same
I
time.
hope not, because I live up at the top.
Do you?
No.
This is East Lake. Revegetate, provide additional public access to Issaquah Creek, but we have the North Fork in there too, right?
We do now. Oh, crap. Oh, well.
Changes.
Yeah.
And then I think you need to remove, yeah, Gilman Village, we talked about that.
Yeah.
We'll do that.
Where is it, Lindsay?
Distinctive city implementing actions.
There we go. Convenient access to Lake Sammamish State Park will be a priority. Now, I like that one. Let's put that one over in
Pickering?
Yeah.
Pickering,
Like it.
because there you go. Convenient, usable,
Highlight.
friendly. I'm not going to die.
And then the other one I had mentioned in there, in distinctive, it says something about an eclectic image of architecture. 2.3.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Who knows? So because this is outside of the core, the architectural manual offers, like, I think 6 different architectural styles that could be chosen. So I think right now, what you would say about this area of town is there is not really a consistent architectural theme. There's a variety of architecture, and it is somewhat eclectic. And I think there's something that's genuine about eclectic imagery as opposed to everything looking the same. And so I
Might go with architectural diversity rather than necessarily eclectic.
Well, okay, so let's ask the question. That goes to Development Commission. What are they going to do with that? Mel? Sorry.
No, so I mean, it's very set now as to one of the 6 that they can choose. The question would be if somebody came in and said, okay, we're going to do lodge style, and there were 3 other lodge style buildings, would the city be able to say, no, you have to do something different because everybody else is lodge style right next to you?
So with this, you could. I think you could say you have to do Grange,
Yeah.
right?
Or a diverse palette?
So the question is do we feel that's important or not? I mean, you know, if you had 4 lodges in a row on East Lake Sam that all were mini storage, what would that
Don't
be?
go there, Keith.
You know, that's
Sorry, our mini
probably
storage is-
reality. What we're thinking is not real. What he just said is now going to happen. Then we can get a really big Paul
No,
Bunyan.
it's not going to be blue anymore.
So there's a couple of, when we don't let me forget, where are we? We're in East Lake, right?
Yep.
Okay, so I have a couple proposed code edits that are coming from the administration that affect land use. And it's vision, there's a vision piece to it, but it's gonna show itself as a code change. So when we get to a certain spot, don't let me forget to talk about that, because otherwise, and you can think about it before our last conversation. And since I've already started, let's go ahead and go there. So.
Being obtuse.
I don't know.
You
So-
think about it before our last conversation. It's like, really?
Well,
I
you know
was
how my brain
yesterday.
goes. It goes in big loops, and it may not make it back. So one of the concerns that was expressed is right now, the zoning for Central is very broad. I mean, it allows a lot of different uses pretty much anywhere. And so what that does is it allows the market to decide what should be built. The concern that has been expressed to me is that that we don't want mini storage and hotels all over Central Issaquah. And so what's being proposed, and we'll talk about it next time because this is new to me, is limiting hotels to Pickering and limiting mini storage to 221st or East Lake Sammamish.
What about hotels at Gilman?
Nope.
No?
221st.
What's wrong with hotels?
Seriously. So the perspective is right now we have a good number of hotels for our population today. And if we were going to build another hotel, it would likely be because of one thing that's in our city, and that's Costco. And if Costco drives the need for another hotel, then the hotel should be located within walking distance of Costco. That's the idea that is out there for us to talk about more fully next time.
Well, it could, if those are the terms and you can get over I-90, you could walk, you could have a
Absolutely.
hotel
You can cross
on.
I-90.
If you can cross I-90, you can
Yeah.
walk underneath it to get to Costco right now. So
Okay, but we're
Well, we
not,
could
do it
have,
on Gilman if that's the language.
we could have a hotel conference center over I-90.
Right.
And we need conference centers, which we don't have meeting rooms here.
Okay, but we're not going to put that in the vision right now, so.
We're not, so that's
kind
going to
of
be a
back.
corollary code amendment that's going to come with this that we'll talk about. You guys will get it for next time. I know things are changing every day. And we'll talk about it. Hopefully, the rest of the conversation about the final package will be shorter, and then we'll be able to spend some time talking about that and whether or not we want to do something different than that.
Okay, getting back to this,
Yeah, sorry.
we put in there the convenient access is a priority. Do you want to add something either in the city implementation or the measure of success to go with that?
I mean, there's the create trail activity space.
No.
Oh, no, that's
It says
perpendicular.
create safe non-motorized crossing
Right.
of.
So this first one was intended to kind of help with that.
Yep.
I think would it make sense to have something that says work with the state to ensure that there is direct access to the state park? Or I guess you could say convenient access.
What does that mean?
We have,
Right where he has
we
this-
have work with state parks to improve neighborhood access to Lake
Yep,
Sam.
sorry, okay, that's good.
So Ron, here's your chance if you want something for the Lake Sammamish Trail crossing of 56th. It would be here. So do you want it?
No, they already took it out, I think. because
Yes.
remember
All right, I will add a bullet.
Or
That intersection
goes across.
makes me paranoid every time I cross it. I've almost been hit 3 times on that intersection, and I'm very careful.
Is it not a protected crossing?
It is.
Where you
Well,
get a walk where there's no...
The problem is it's more the, and I will probably upset some of our viewing public. It's the mentality of the drivers on 56th and East Lake Sam. It's very auto-oriented. People are trying to get to the plateau as quickly as they can, and they're just not looking out for bikes and peds. They're just in their way. I mean, if you watch people coming southbound, is that south?
Yes.
Southeast bound on East Lake Sammamish, when they get to the traffic light at 56, that's really their first, I mean, the roundabout doesn't really count because you can kind of time it so you can fly around that, right? So they're coming down the hill, they're flying around the roundabout, they're coming south on East Lake Sam, and most of them, even if they they'll just kind of blow through that and make their right turn without even stopping. It's like they haven't even hit the mentality of being in the city yet and having conflicts of bikes and peds. It's just not in their mind, because when you come down that way, there's just really no conflicts that you have to deal with because there's not many people walking up and down 43rd. And then if you are on the trail, you're kind of out of sight for most drivers. So sorry for that whole little
So
diatribe.
streetscaping could improve that, the perception that they're coming into an area with pedestrians and bikes.
Well, one thing we talked about, so there's a possibility that there'll be a new light if a fire station ever gets built south of Hans Jensen. We also talked about if BMC redevelops, that you need to be able to get people from that side of East Lake Sam over to where the Microsoft and Siemens building is. And so that will evolve over time. It's just not great now. It's not great now.
So, remember, you can always change the road design to get the people to go slower and potentially have a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit, which is the most efficient way to get the largest number of cars through a place, but they're going slower and it makes it easier to cross the street. So nowhere, though we keep saying pedestrian priority, we keep giving the priority to the cars and saying, well, the pedestrians, they can cross occasionally. And I think we're missing an opportunity to actually create a situation where the pedestrians feel safe and comfortable and the cars know that they are in an area where they have to slow down. Right now, the Central Issaquah plan is not put together to do that. nor are these visions
Where would that be
doing that.
addressed in code? Much like we're going to talk about hillsides, and then AJ had expressed another thing. That's kind of another visionary idea of how do we handle people crossings and stuff.
Well, that would be, we have a master pedestrian network, right? Or a trail network? I feel like I remember seeing that in the CIP.
We have a non-motorized plan.
Yes, that's what I was reading
We do.
for.
I don't know if it calls for anything in
No,
this.
you
That
have a
wouldn't slow down the cars.
You
though.
have
No, but
what
it
you have is
identifies
a road
crossing points.
network that describes how each of the road corridors should be handled. And that is the overriding vision of the road corridor, sort of irrespective of the development that's going in around them. And so it's those definitions that are
But
holding that.
if you have a non-motorized master plan, wouldn't that be your starting point for identifying intersections that need to be improved for non-motorized access?
Right, but if the solution is to slow down the traffic with a different speed limit, that's not in the,
Non-motorized.
That's
plan.
not
or
part
a
of it.
landscape piece, that wouldn't be in the non-motorized.
And over 2 years ago, the police actually recommended that that be dropped to 35 to match Sammamish and the whole corridor. And at that time, city council said no. So, that's part of what I think we really need to do with the whole network is, and part of this is say, what is, to make it pedestrian friendly, we need to look at the whole network and reset the codes of the speed limits.
So Joan, Keith, I'm not sure if that's something that we could put on our conversation point, and I don't even know if that would be a PPC thing versus city council, but the idea of talking about how we prioritize pedestrians and bikes.
So PPC could make a recommendation to send that particular item to the Transportation Advisory Board, because there is a new Transportation Advisory Board that's getting formed, and I
I
think,
thought we weren't getting the transportation person in the city, and so that was going to get pushed off.
well, the wind blew a different direction. So as far as I know, the transportation planner is coming, and that is moving forward.
Okay, we'll talk.
But so we've got that covered under measures of success, talking about vehicular-dominated streets have been transformed. Do we simply need to add something to the city implementation actions that talks about improving speed? I don't think speed is the right word, though speed is, I think, is how you get to it, specifically of Lake Sammamish Parkway. I think you've got the measures of success, so I think the city implementation actions need a bullet that specifically addresses. So you've got complete pedestrian bike facilities on Lake Sammamish Parkway. That's great. I think that sounds like there needs to be an additional bullet that says it's not cars navigate Lake Sammamish Parkway as if they're on a city street and not an urban boulevard. Are you feeling what I'm reaching for? Something about like the city needs to look at doing a
Transform
road
East Lake
diet.
Sammamish Parkway into something.
There needs to be some sort of, a road diet, not in eliminating lanes, but like narrowing lanes, changing intersections, changing the
Yep,
speed limit.
Trees in the middle, whatever that is.
Yeah,
Put it on a diet.
Yep.
yeah. But I don't want to say road diet because usually road diet involves eliminating a lane or two, and I don't think that's necessary.
Or just narrowing a
But just,
lane is road
but wouldn't
diets.
would something like that make sense, Keith? That if, as you transition from the parkway into the actual urban neighborhood, as lanes get narrow or whatnot, that would help people slow down, something like that.
Transform ELSP into
more something.
a road
Okay, good.
in an environment, urban environment, whatever.
Yeah, I'll figure something to suggest for next
Because
time.
that is a city street, right?
Smoking tonight on his words. I like it. Something.
Keith, that is a city street, correct?
Yeah,
So-
oh yeah.
Yeah.
So that is.
So unlike SR 900, where we can't.
We have problems,
dictate.
we have limitations there. I
Yeah,
mean, we have to
but
work
this
with
one, we've got a
Washington.
lot of flexibility to what
It
we
is
can
ours.
do. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that would be a great additional action.
Okay, you just have to be careful that, you know, we have to let the city be moving, and we can't cut it down to restrict it enough to
Right,
just say-
which is why I want to be clear, like, I'm not advocating that we're like eliminating lanes. It's just that traffic slows down as they go through and navigate either getting to I-90 or getting to 56.
I think you could just eliminate all of it.
Faster
Really, we should
doesn't-
cut
faster-
off Sammamish.
Yeah.
There you go.
Faster doesn't mean more cars move through it at a given point in time. Slower actually platoons the cars most efficiently. It's just when there isn't a lot of cars, they're going to have to go slower too. That's all.
So Keith, to your point, I want to make sure we don't miss a gap. You were saying that we might want to recommend something. Could you explain more about that?
So, so if you feel like there's a missing piece here that's transportation related, I think what we can do, so we're going to come up with our visions, but there can be a whole set of other things that you might want to recommend to the city council. And like I said, I think there is a new transportation advisory board being put together, and you know they will have some things on their work plate already, but getting recommendations going from PPC to council for maybe redirection to the TAB, that absolutely makes sense. So I think you guys shouldn't lose those ideas as you talk through these things. And if it makes sense, like for example, you know, with the green necklace, you know, it didn't make sense for you guys to solve that puzzle because it's really the Parks Board needed to, you know, carry that burden. But you guys got to work with them, and maybe there's an opportunity at some point for this group to have a joint meeting with the TAB once it's put together, and to talk about that issue, to say, hey, look, you know, as we were going through the visions, this became an issue that we felt like it wanted a public conversation, and so you guys could then seed that for them to.
Because that's really the policy behind how we treat pedestrians in the city.
Right. There's a bigger policy piece, and I don't know if you want to touch the third rail or not, but the whole issue of regional, so the streets right now that push regional traffic, so East Lake Sam is definitely one, right, as is 56, as is Newport and Front Street. And so, you know, the question is, and I think we've heard it in various places, is how do we turn those streets right now that function more for regional traffic movement back towards more local city function? Not to say they're not going to still move regional traffic, but how do we reprioritize what the purpose of those are? So that's a bigger conversation, but these two things, 56th and East Lake Sam, potentially fall into that because the reason they are what they are is because they're moving traffic to Sammamish.
So can I ask that we just consider a conversation about that, dependent obviously on whether the Transportation Advisory Board comes on board and if we have time in our schedule, but just something so that we at least look at whether we're going to talk about it.
I think it's a topic that we all are really concerned about. And if we had any opportunity to discuss it further outside of today,
I noticed Trish is not taking notes. I think you were hearing they would
So
like
I
to.
know, I looked at the schedule and there were, you know, 1 or 2 weeks where we actually didn't meet. And so,
In the whole year?
since
None of
we've
the
already
comp plan
put on
amendments are on
one
there.
thing, we could always add another, just in case you had nothing else to put on there.
Homework.
But again, it would be outside today's discussion.
Right.
I did circle the last livable thing from the measures of success. I wasn't sure how you were going to manage regional traffic on Sammamish, Lake Sammamish Parkway. I didn't know how you were going to do that.
Yeah.
I think that goes to the implementation. Sorry, Keith.
Yeah, so do we need to actually make a motion for that, or we're just
No.
generally giving you a recommendation? Okay.
We don't have to make a recommendation to anybody except to Trish to put on the schedule.
Put on the homework.
I think I've forgotten something, and I'm sure you report.
Your mic's not on.
Who turned it off? Oh, Mary did. Wayfinding for all of these things, everybody's always lost in this, in town, and as things change, they're going to continue to be lost. Is there an overarching wayfinding
Create
that's
trail
threading
hub
through
with-
all of them, not just for trails, but for streets too, because people are always, they can't tell which side of the freeway they're on. All the shopping centers look the same.
So we've been, so that, I don't know that particular topic is specific to Central Issaquah. I mean, I think that general wayfinding conversation wants to be citywide.
Well, only if you want the developer to feed into your wayfinding scheme.
So the way that we did it in the Highlands is if you wanted a kiosk with sign on it, it had to have a public amenity component too, like a trail sign or something like that. So we did something in the Highlands, and you can see some wayfinding kiosks up there. But we haven't moved that conversation along on the valley floor yet. And part of it is just staffing resources. We haven't had the bandwidth to work on it.
So that'll be something that's going to sort of overlay onto it, maybe like a green necklace or
So we have to
something.
update the sign code anyway because of
Yes.
case in Arizona. So
That is on our schedule.
so we can incorporate it into our sign code update.
Wasn't there something related to branding as well, a branding exercise?
Yeah,
that
the
needed to
branding
be
and the
done
wayfinding
to
are
direct what those are
connected,
gonna look like?
and both of those are a little bit, we're stuck because we're missing a resource in communications.
Moving right back to
Yeah.
here.
Yes, welcome back.
Is there anything else on this?
I had a couple questions. One, if you can scroll up, Keith, to the, let's see, the developer obligations under distinctive,
Yep, which number?
horizontal and vertical mixed use.
2.2?
Yeah, 2.2. Does that mean that each project would have to be mixed use, either horizontal or vertical?
So what that says to me is that we have both. It's not one or the other. It's you have both vertical and horizontal mixed use.
I'm thinking for a developer obligation, if a developer came in and said, I'm going to build this apartment building.
Right next
Wouldn't
to the retail center.
Well, or what if it was between two other apartment buildings? Would we say you can't do that? You have to include some mixed use in it?
I don't think we would.
It sounds
Where am
like.
I? Oh, crud. So my third surprise.
Oh, crud.
Always more surprises. So in Pickering and Gilman, we have the no loss of square footage or jobs. The other recommendation that goes in East Lake too.
Right.
So, to Mel's question now that we know that, what I would say is if you were taking out, this goes back to the example I gave in Pickering, if you're taking out residential, or if you're taking out just surface parking lot, you could build apartments or condominiums without it being vertically mixed use. If you're taking out retail or commercial space, you have to replace at least as much jobs or square footage to make it no net loss.
So if we have the no net loss, do we still need 2.2?
Probably not. I'll put a question mark for now and think about it longer than just 3 seconds.
And
No, you would have the no net loss of jobs as 1.5.
We have the no net loss is 1.5.
And then you could remove 2.2.
And I can see 2.2 as being a
Maybe.
measure of success with different wording.
Ooh,
Because that's what we'd like to see,
I like that.
but not the developer obligation.
And we don't really have a very good definition of horizontal mixed use in our world. So is this whole thing going to have a new definitions added anywhere? Or
Glossary?
words that are words that have not yet been defined?
I'm trying to not use those words.
Okay, well, we're using horizontal mixed use that's not defined anywhere as anything functional.
So let's see if it stays. Because
Okay.
right now, there's a question mark. Do we still need this?
Well, I can phrase it again. We need a definition for horizontal mixed use. Anyway.
I had another question, if you don't mind. The Gilman Village, we've got developer obligation, city implementing action, and a measure of success. We say its connection to small town charm should be retained, work with the property owner to preserve the character, and then measure of success is that Gilman Village is preserved as a city treasure.
Walks you right through it, doesn't it?
Exactly, yeah. I guess the question is, I mean, it's starting, to me, I'm not the owner of Gilman Village, but it sounds to me like somebody's spot zoning my property to say you can't do anything else on that property. And I don't know if that's, maybe it's what we
does not
want.
say that.
I think you could do anything with it. You just have to preserve character.
Right. So you're trying to preserve. So ideally, so this is a continuum of, on the far right-hand side is, yes, maybe the city buys up the development rights and it gets preserved as is. Period. Right. I think that's ultimate success. Somewhere in the middle is maybe part of it gets redeveloped and you save some of it as kind of a commercial component or retail component, but then there's maybe some apartments or something gets built in amongst that. Okay, you still got a connection to the small town, those old structures, at least some of them maybe get preserved. Maybe there's a way to do that. The far left-hand side is they do something that's very Disney-like, and the whole thing gets bladed, and there's some remnant of
They
Gilman
don't have
Village
to do anything anyway. because
incorporated
it's
into
a
redevelopment. So
It's a small town after all.
exactly. So
Can we put Aaron in the giant teacup?
so
He would like that.
How about Keith?
With Aaron?
no.
And spin it.
I like Aaron. So I don't know. So Mel, this one's a hard one. I think if we and maybe as the city goes through, I'm going to plant a seed, and we'll see if any of you try and move it forward. Maybe as the city goes through its strategic planning process and identifies the things that are very important to it, maybe this gets put on the table for consideration in terms of, you know what, you guys should really start thinking about buying the development right. I mean, if we came to Aaron and said, we'll buy the development rights off this property if you leave it the way it is, he'd say, sure, here's the price tag for that. I mean, he's not going to say no. So, but that conversation will never happen if this isn't in this plan. It just won't. So I don't know what your point was, but
Well, I guess part of it is a question if somebody comes in with a project
Yeah.
and says, we want to put an apartment project there,
yeah.
and they come to the Development Commission and it said, reading this says, should be retained. Well, should's not a shall.
Right.
Could be tricky decisions and, yeah.
So the way I would read this one is there would be hopefully a conversation. If they came in with a complete bulldoze and redo, the question is, okay, there's some things about Gilman Village that people really like. There's some small scale retail opportunities. There's some kind of quaint walking opportunities. What could you do with your project if you're not going to save any of it? What could you do to bring some of those qualities into your project? So, I mean, that would be how I would approach that one. It's not an absolute, right? If it was an absolute, we should turn should into shall.
Okay.
Imagine the school district wanting to build a school in Gilman Village, flat developable property.
No,
With
it's not.
affordable housing on top.
And small town charm.
And retain its character.
Be a one-room school.
Okay. you
All
guys
right,
are
punchy
losing
crowd,
it.
what else you want to talk
I don't
about?
have anything else.
I think we're done. Any
We
other
haven't even gotten to
Two
confluence.
thoughts. One was unlivable and no loss of jobs, and this is the replaceable retail spaces. It seems to me there was a Gilman Gallery that used to exist where the Atlas is that moved to by the Value Village. It's no longer there for, I think, a loss of lease for varying reasons. I think we lost something of a character charm when that left. I don't know if we're gaining necessarily something in the character by having a Lazy Boy store per se, but I think this is more than just a jobs issue. It's a character issue, part of that small town feeling. That's part of that. I'd like to capture that as more than just a no loss of jobs. That talks about a character of a retail space.
So off to,
I think that's a great goal, Steve. I think the problem is, so the city doesn't get to choose who occupies the retail spaces, right? So what happens is, so we could put a ton of design guidelines in that say, spaces have to be a certain size to try and exclude national chains, right?
I agree, and I'm not trying to solution it here, but I'm saying I think that there's a conversation that goes along with that being part of the discussion. I agree at 8:45. I don't know that we necessarily want to solution it tonight, but I'd like to capture the idea.
I will write-
Just in
I
the sake
will
of
write
moving
it
on,
down.
the other thing I want to mention was under city implemented actions, the last bullet, offer technical assistance for green buildings. It seems like that should be something that's carried throughout the document.
That should be in every neighborhood.
Well, I don't know that it's in currently.
Okay. If it's not, I will check.
we done confluence, I can't even remember. Okay,
Okay.
we have 15
Confluence?
15 minutes to
And we
do-
have to talk about the structure, the options.
Okay.
Okay, confluence. Loving it. Loving it. All right, look how short it
So
is.
any
Oh,
of the
wait,
Gilman Village stuff on the previous one needs to move over to
we
this.
will migrate it all.
Yep.
Okay, I have my pitch. I don't think it should be in the central Issaqauh plan. I think all these things are very close to the MUR, and it should just go back to the MUR where it was before.
What does that mean?
So Connie, what
She would take it,
Close
so
to the
like,
MUR?
so that's mixed-use residential zoning. So she would take it out of central and just have it be a floater.
Which we have the mixed-use residential, which is basically saying this, but you,
Okay,
Don't
Keith,
have
pitch
to.
it one way versus the other. Quick, short.
Well,
Like, is there a specific reason that we want to keep it in to protect something?
so, sorry. So
You have to share.
I will pass my cup of ice around. So what I would say is, I don't know the answer. That's an interesting question. I don't know what the advantages are in or out. I think right now, we at least have a vision for that neighborhood since it's in, right? There's an opportunity to describe what's there, what we want, what we expect. As soon as it goes out, nothing. It is whatever it is, right? And so I guess because I'm a planner, I would say I'd rather have it here where we've described it. It has architectural standards that apply if it's in. If it's out, it doesn't. You could build a super modern something. I I used that before. So I don't know. I mean, I know what it is when it's in. I feel like I have less control if it's out.
John, yes, no?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if, unless there's a great reason to take it out, since it's
Yeah.
already in.
And
I would agree, and
Okay.
Can I make a suggestion about this? What about the possibility of sort of bifurcating it at Juniper? Because I think there could be, and I don't know if it's in or out, but.
Juniper's this one?
Right. I think there's a very distinct difference in development potential and what could and should happen north of Juniper. We've already seen it happen. We've got the admin building, we've got the Vale Apartments, we've got the at work that would be redeveloped. All that stuff there seems to me that it would be and should be redeveloped at the central Issaquah kind of scale. And then south of Juniper, I can see where maybe you take that portion out and put that into outside, or treat that zoning differently there.
I like the idea of treating the zoning different. Because if you take it out, then we lose control, to his point, right? We would lose control of what could be there. For instance, the lot where the auto shop sitting on across from the school.
That's right there, right?
Right.
yeah.
So if so that would be in because that's on the,
Yep. What's that south of there?
That's one of our lovely
The
mini
storage.
storages.
Yep.
and then the field across, next to the storage unit is actually a reservoir, right?
Right.
So that's not buildable either.
So aren't they gonna, with the
Yeah.
school, isn't the school lot getting fully redeveloped, right? To be kind of an urban type school? So
Yeah.
we'd want to be able to control what happened. I guess we'd miss a
Yeah.
gap there to connect central to that kind of urban school lot if we did.
That's a good point. Should we include the school in that?
They already have their own urban standards, right?
Well,
No.
once we talk about it,
Compact
they do.
standards.
Compact standards. And they don't have access off of Newport anyway.
Not yet.
Well,
Yeah. I think it's important to keep the stuff south of Juniper mainly because of the east and west boundaries, because we want to make sure those urbanized.
So we'll get to have a whole conversation about the zoning standards for this neighborhood, and I don't even know what that is yet. We're gonna have to look at what's allowed there now, what was allowed there prior to including it in central Issaquah, and see if it's this, or if it's something completely different. So that's something we would do. Is that later this year? Is that the this year thing? If it's
Comes out of Central?
no, as an implementing measure. So remember we talked about initiate a code revision? Would we do that this
Right.
year?
I believed we were going to try.
Okay. Woo. How many free weeks did you have?
I said every
Weekends?
well, I mean, I suppose you could keep your
So-
vision and turn that into the.
So
merge
right
or-
now, the decision is to keep it in.
Okay. And I want to maybe unpack a conversation that might have been before the meeting started tonight. So this is the only neighborhood that talks about schools and access to schools. And I guess the question for y'all is, does that language about walking to schools and opportunities to walk to schools, should that need to populate all the neighborhoods, or leave it just in this one, or something in between?
I think it's more than school. I think it's more than school walking routes. It's also school locations. But I'm not sure how we handle that, both as a city and as a vision.
And to add to that, I don't know where this would land, but you have childcare resources. So if in Pickering and Gilman, we have X number of people living in a very confined area, it would be convenient to have child caring services within that community. I
But the
don't know if that
market
would
will
be-
respond to that.
You think that'd be private, or you think that would be like kindergarten?
Kindergarten would be with schools, daycare would be private.
I mean, right now, you guys got a transit-oriented development presentation, right? So they're planning a Bright Horizons in that project. So that will be kind of what will happen more frequently is with those multi-story residential projects, there probably will be daycare that comes with, just because there's a need. But I think it will be market-based for the most part.
Well, I'd like to see that schools are added any place where there are considerable more density as housing, is we ought to put urban schools there so there's walkability. Because we already know that they're maxed out in land. And so if we don't bring it to the table sooner, I don't know what's going to happen. And I would like to see something in the Gilman that we put schools in there and walkability. And Issaquah does have preschool in their school systems now. So, to say that that's not, going to be private, I don't think is also accurate. It can be also public.
Yeah. So would that be in city implementing actions to work with the Issaquah School District to plan locations?
Yeah, it would not be obviously a developer obligation.
Yeah.
I don't think we would have any.
I think you could include the walking routes on each of the areas, but in developer obligations, but I do think city implementing actions for each of the neighborhoods. Well, at least Pickering and Gilman. How many of the others do you think we need to think about schools?
Maybe East Lake.
You need, at a
Maybe
minimum,
Eastlake?
elementary schools, and that's where the Midwest works with the developers and builds the development around the elementary schools. And so I think some sort of, partnership with developers could be put in here.
I think we need to pull the school district around to that idea before putting it in a vision. To the idea of working with developers to kind of site their schools.
I think it would help pull them around.
Could be.
Yeah.
Could be.
All right, so I'll work on some school language that permeates more than just confluence.
It's just a comment, too. Having the elementary schools close to housing could eliminate potentially cars and
Yep.
traffic.
So can you just add it in the daily retail and service needs under sustainability?
For
Add
confluence?
Schools, for all of them, because you do that for all of them, don't you? Would schools be in there? But that's the bicycle and walking and bicycle options, so it's sort of going at it from the back door.
It could also live in maybe livable.
Yeah.
'Cause
And
livable is
livable
like-
is good, I think
yeah.
maybe better in livable. Mel liked livable, as I recall.
Yeah. I would put it in livable city implementing.
Let's just sleep at your school? Put it in livable.
Okay, Jonah, moving us along. So one of the suggestions from last meeting was, as we talked about the today and future section of, do I need to increase the size? Is that okay?
Control mouse scroll. Hold control
Yes.
and scroll your mouse in.
Really? Oh, wow, okay.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so we talked about last time a way to maybe better connect the future description to what we're actually doing in the objectives piece. And so Lindsay provided a suggestion for how that might work for just one neighborhood. So rather than do this for all of them, this is more, I think, we're using as a talking conversation point to say, okay, we've got really two options here, bless you. And so which do you like better? And, you know, if you guys choose option 2, I think AJ voted for option 2 before he left. You know, and maybe Lindsay wants to talk about it a little bit.
I was just going to say, I didn't rewrite any of that. It's just the idea that it's kind of broken down so that somebody can very clearly say, here's what the scale of this neighborhood is going to be. Here's how we view it treating residential areas. Here's how the parks and natural environment are handled or focused on. Just in a clearer way for the reader of the document.
Yeah.
So you didn't rewrite that, that's just,
I just pulled basically the stuff from the future. I think I might have added a sentence or something, but generally, where there wasn't anything in the future one. But generally, it's the idea that it's just broken out and making sure that we're addressing each of those areas distinctly, because those were the areas when I went and looked at Kirkland and Bellevue and Redmond's neighborhood visions, they all had either specific labeled paragraphs or the paragraphs were obviously subject-oriented toward each of those areas.
Okay.
Did you-
Consensus?
Did you look at how trying to fit those into the 4 categories that we already have it broken down into, or does it not?
You know, I chose those categories because that was what was distinct on all of them, including going back to the task force.
Yeah.
Those were consistently mentioned. And so I didn't put it into those 4, primarily because that character and scale idea, I think it's really important to call out, because really, if we're talking about a vision for a neighborhood, that's one of those really important things to say, this neighborhood is this, and that doesn't necessarily match with those
Okay.
4.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
And I don't care what the labels are, those were just kind of my descriptors to give you guys an idea. They can be pretty-ified.
I like this because it makes sure that in each neighborhood we hit on all of those things and don't leave out one of those important categories just because it's in paragraph form and we don't skimp on it, right?
I like the flow. I think it makes a lot more sense the second way.
I think it could be enhanced a little bit by indenting the paragraph.
Sure.
But actually, I like the way it's written. I think it draws your attention to specifically what's important, to Lindsay's point. Yeah, so I like it. I
Okay,
agree.
so the 4 of us can vote on this? You
We're
like-
all thumbs up.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, can I say why I don't like it? Now that you voted?
Well,
Or do
we
you
really
not want to
haven't voted,
hear?
but-
Okay, well then I won't.
No, you can't.
This exact thing was there before. And what happens is it parses it down into categories, and then you're reparsing your categories again. So when you're reading it, you are now adjusting to a new schematic in your brain. And then you go past this, and there is yet another series of information that is does not echo this. And so in this document, then, you would have 3 different structures that you were trying to figure out how you were supposed to use them as tools. So if you wanted to try to break, I think they get broken down in the structure that was already created. If you didn't like the categories that were created and you had wanted to use these, then you could have done that, but that isn't how it went. So I would just go with the simplicity of a paragraph, which most people may or may not read, and then they will get into the knit and grit of the structure, because too many structures just creates confusion to me. And that's why I would just go with a paragraph that then flows into the structure, and then we have to deal with the next structure, which we haven't even talked about. So too many structures just makes it confusing.
Okay, so what if we then change this up to use those 4?
I think if these are your important categories, I think this is a good tool to make sure that you get your important categories in your list, but then used as a tool and then drop it off after you've used it as a tool.
I think it's good for the readers to have call-outs because some people are going to be more interested in certain areas. So I would want to see it as labeling for the reader.
But you're categorizing first, and then you're categorizing in an entire different way a page
Agreed.
later.
Yeah,
So,
and-
I mean, that's
and
not...
I hear you on
That's
that.
not helpful.
Yeah, no, I hear you, and I think that's very important. So, I mean, you could take the character scale idea and just use that without a label as kind of an introduction, and then potentially use the 4 categories.
I think the first 2 could be considered livable.
Yeah. And then mobility and connectivity is obviously connected. Parks and natural environment is obviously sustainable. Distinctive could be that kind of idea of character and scale. So we could bundle them into those 4 if we wanted to.
Right, and that would at least make
Lead into,
sense.
yeah.
It would be consistent. Is it necessary? I don't know. For those who like to read paragraphs, it's not helpful because some people actually like to read paragraphs. It's all, there's like several different ways to read the same information the way it is. And I don't care as long as they're consistent if you have the headers, as long as they don't, this looks like they're categories in some way.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I think, I mean, I totally agree that there's places where paragraphs are great, and some people read that. I think our paragraphs, as they stand, feel fragmented and
Right.
less of like a continuous thought.
Right.
So I think breaking it down into categories from what it is now makes more sense and makes it more readable and usable. And I think if they did lead into kind of breaking it down into our further structure,
Right,
then I think that would be a little more cohesive.
right. So the
So-
same concept, but just with headers of the categories that you've already created.
Yes.
Yes.
If there's a way, yeah.
You get that?
I did.
But that's not what you voted on.
Well, this was not a voting thing.
Right.
The
So,
reason
I
why
like the
we have so
second
many
method.
people around the table is because you get more ideas. I have this thing about, no, I don't like the paragraph because to me, it just all bands together. But I like the fact that there is one sentence up there and then you go into the 4 things that you do. The one sentence could be just the West Newport will be this, and then you have your other things under it.
Yes, it's all-
Because I think it can't start with that, it has to have a beginning. Okay, so
Like a
we've
vision
changed everything.
Like a vision sentence, basically.
Yeah, visions, yeah,
Your executive summary?
yeah. Which is the first sentence.
I like the discussion we just had.
Yeah,
okay.
It evolved,
yeah.
but it made
That's
progress.
great.
Appreciate
Great.
All right. We will work on that for next time. And so, so you guys are going to get, Trish already sent something, or it's going out tomorrow?
It's already got it.
Yeah, so you're going to get a new version on Monday, because I probably need the weekend to work on it. So you'll get it Monday. So disregard what you got from Trish earlier. What you get on Monday is what we're going to talk about on the 28th. Which is Wednesday. So it'll be redlined, so you guys will be able to see what's been changed. And hopefully I've captured everything that we talked about tonight. And if not, we'll talk about it on Wednesday.
So since this is going to be a package.
Package.
That will go to Land and Shore.
Yes.
Following week or so. Can we get, the beginning, the vision statement?
Yes.
And how it's all put together, the
Yes.
whole package?
You get the
and
whole
what it's
thing.
going to look like?
Yes.
Okay.
And just as an addendum to what you said, the new story is in this one, this new package that I passed out today.
Okay.
So that the other pieces are old, but that's the new package that I found in a crossed-out version from you and Kristen.
So everything will be there Monday except for the green network. I'm going to leave that as a TBD because we won't have finished that until the 8th when we meet with Parks Board for the second time, right? So we'll just leave that as to be plugged in.
So you're going to hand out the new story on Monday as well?
Yeah.
Again?
So it's going to be all together. They're going to get the new story and neighborhoods 1 through 5.
Okay.
It will be basically
the new story.
what Land and Shore will get, except yours will be redlined, since it's part of our conversation. Ultimately, they'll get a clean copy.
So all of those other things that we talked about for the year, the size, height, and all those things, all those different housing that we looked at, is that part of the vision?
You mean the code amendments for the moratorium? Like structured parking,
right.
vertical mixed use? Yeah, those are already adopted and in place.
I know they're adopted.
They're
but are
not
they-
in so those things like the architectural manual and all that stuff is not part of the vision or the plan. Their code, all that stuff, the requirement for structured parking, all that got put into the SIDS.
Okay,
Standards.
so that's already in code.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Okay.
to be clear, there's no homework this weekend. We have to wait till,
You have the weekend off, Ron. Woo! Winter break.
I got a honeydew, so it's not off.
So you guys will get the new package and the new proposed code amendments relating to hotels and mini storage on Monday.
That's on Monday too?
Yeah, that's done. I just
Okay.
was going to talk to you about
I
it.
was going to say, wow.
Never see you.
So I thought that we would talk about the first two communities in 10 minutes and just go through and make sure that the edits were all done, and it took an hour and a half. So if you put in all those other things next Wednesday,
Might be a long meeting. You might need some tea.
bring cookies or something.
Okay.
It might
Okay.
be- it
You
might
want
be
cookies?
here- We might be here a while.
You want cookies or brownies or what do you want?
Oh, I'm,
And a water fountain.
Water fountain? What?
yeah.
It's called the bathroom.
It's coming soon.
Yeah.
No, I'm just saying, it
That'll make
could be a
the
long
conversation
meeting, because
flow.
it will be the last time we look at,
Yeah.
hopefully the last time we look at vision, so be prepared.
Is Trish writing down treats?
Yes, I am.
More
I don't know
homework.
about the water fountain. I can't help you there, but I'll see if I can bring
Maybe
something.
cups and a
Some
pincher.
cider.
Okay, so,
PPC always used to have treats.
so
I was a
next
younger woman
Wednesday,
then.
Wow.
next Wednesday at 6:30 here.
Here,
Okay.
in the
Okay.
U.
So we will be here. So anything for the good of the order? Yes, no?
Nope. Thank you all.
With that, I close the meeting at 9:10.